Hi guys, welcome to Easy Terrain Builds. My name's John, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to build industrial buildings. Now try not to be put off too much with the complexity of this build because it does look complicated, but they're quite easy skills that I'll show you that you can adapt and use on any size building. So what we're going to do is start with the staircase for this building, because this will give us the constant height measurement we need to know, the first level we're going to go up to. I prefer to buy a decent quality set of stairs from a manufacturer. This is War Games Tournaments, because it saves you a lot of faffing around with staircases. You can get them wrong. You can scratch build them for some of the other projects, like I've shown you with the orcs and the industrial builds, the shanty towns. But for an industrial building, I want something that looks a bit more official, something that's been made properly, like by the Imperials. So I've chosen this staircase set, and as you can see, it actually comes out. It's a really nice set. It's got an L shape to it, and this is going to give us the height of the first level. So what I'm going to use is some of these metal plating sheets I have, cut it to size, because on this set they leave massive gaps for some reason on the staircase, and if you're looking at the scale of your models and the size of their feet, they're going to fall through those gaps. So I'm just going to fill those gaps in with those metal sheet plating to make it look a little bit better and more official. So that lower part's easy. The top section, it's designed this kit to sort of slot into another kit, so I need to fill that gap with some MDF. So the actual kit, the sheet it comes with, gives you some spare MDF sheets, sort of space on it. So I'm going to just measure the size, and I'm going to cut out that little block of MDF to fill the top step up, and then I'm going to cover that top step. So yeah, it slots in nicely there, because that's where it would slot into another bit of terrain that they supply, War Games Tournaments. And I'm actually going to then cover that as well, like the middle section, with the checker plating metal sheets, and glue that in place. And that just a little bit of fixing will make that look a lot better on the staircase. So for this project also, I'm going to need a base to mount the walls of the building onto. Just give us an idea of the size. So if you've got a bit of spare MDF sheeting like this, you can use any size you want, as long as it fits to your staircase, obviously. That's about where I want my stairs to be, and then I'm going to be using foam board. You can buy in any sort of standard hobby shop. I get mine from Hobbycraft. And it's just 2 bits of cardboard with a bit of foam in between, and it's great for building cheap, quick walls. And I'm going to use it as both the walls and the base for each level. So at this stage I'm just playing around with where I want the staircase to be and get an idea of what I'm going to do. So build a wall out there, maybe have a layer overlapping above the first one. So in order to work out the height of the walls, I'm going to need to measure the height of the staircase. And then, because I'm going to put the next layer of foam on top of that wall, I need to minus off the thickness of that piece of foam, because obviously if I've put it as high as the staircase, then the foam's going to make it a little bit higher, which I don't want. So to cut the foam, you're going to need a metal ruler and a sharp craft knife. And my suggestion is cut slowly and precisely. Just do lots of thin cuts rather than trying to cut it in one piece, because you're just going to end up tearing it rather than cutting it, unless you've got a super sharp knife. So now I've got the width of my walls. I just want to make sure that with the width of the foam board on top, it's still about right for the staircase to match up, because at this point, if it's not, then I need to slice a little bit more off those walls. But yeah, I'm fairly happy with the height of that now, and now I'm going to cut that wall section to the right length, and then we can start gluing. So now I've got my first wall section that I'm going to glue in place here, so the staircase meets up to it. This will be the outer wall, and then I'll have a second piece for the inner wall. So if you've been watching my videos by now, you'll know I love the hot glue gun. It's just so simple and easy to use. I've used PVA glue previously in these kind of builds, and the only difference really is just the length of time it takes for the glue to dry. With hot glue, it's pretty much instant. Give it a little bit of firm pressure, make sure it's perpendicular so the staircase will match up to it, and it will lay flush when I put the top section on. Yeah, I'm fairly happy with that. As you can see, that's pretty much glued in place already, and then I'll just be getting the next wall section to put in place. So here we go with the second wall. To cut this to the right size, I've just duplicated that first wall section. So I'm going to put the staircase in about where I want it eventually to be, so I know that it's going to sit flush when I glue this second wall in. This is probably like the key moment to where you want to place everything. So again, the hot glue gun, it gives you a couple of seconds to have a little bit of play with it once you put it in place, but apart from that, it's pretty much instant. So I'm going to hold those stairs in place because that's exactly where I want to be, and pretty much put that wall right plush up to it. It's going to have a tiny mil or two gap. You'll see in a minute why I'm going to leave a slight gap, because I'm going to be putting something on that surface of the wall, so it's not just flat. There we go. There's my two main walls, and the stairs match up nicely to that. Then we're going to move on to the next section. So to get that nice corrugated metal effect, I'm just going to use corrugated card from Hobbycraft. It's cheap. It's a couple of pounds for 10 sheets, A4 sheets. And it's going to be easily enough to cover the whole of this building. So there's the gap I was talking about, because the corrugated is going to be between the foam board and the stairs. And then we're going to keep working our way next around the stairs to sort of block them in a little bit with the outer wall sections of the building. So making sure it's the same height as the previous sections of walls. This is going to be the next 90-degree wall I'm going to glue into place, and then again I'm going to go left 90 degrees from that, again following the staircase, hot glue gun along the bottom and on the side so it glues up to the other wall sections I've already put in place to give it that rigidity. Just careful with the stairs, don't want to move it around too much, and again I want to leave a little bit of a gap between the stairs and the wall just for that corrugated metal sheeting to be able to glue on. And you can see why I've left the stairs not glued on quite yet, because it's so much easier working around the structure without it. Just keep it moving backwards and forwards into place to make sure you've got the right positioning. And there's that next section. I'm happy with that. And again, with the height sorted now for the walls, I can just cut my sections to the right width and height now and fill in all the side gaps. And once the side's done, I can come back to the front and play around a little bit with what I want to do here. So I've cut a little bit of a section here and create a 90 degree and create a little gap at the end of the building, so it's not just one big square. I'm going to create some interesting shapes so the guys can move around, maybe even add some walkways, whatever inspires you really. So here you can see the shape I've ended up with. Staircase fit on the right, and then I've got that bit of a gap down the left hand side. I can then do an overhang section here maybe, some pillars dropping down. It really developed as I was going. I had no pre-thought really of exactly what I wanted. But moving on, we're just going to create the first floor now, essentially. So the easiest way for me to do this, you could use rulers and measure it all exactly, but I just turn the whole thing upside down, draw an outline on the foam board, cut it out and stick it on top. But to make things just a little bit more complicated with this build, well, I say complicated, it is still easy, but something a bit more unique is I want to create the overhang section. So to begin with, I'm going to measure out exactly the footprint of that first floor. As you can see here, the shape. But what I also want to do is create the overhang. So the upper section, as you can see here, I've cut out. I've still got that left-hand section is going to overhang. So cutting that piece out, you can see now it fits nicely on the top. And I've got it overhanging the whole of that bottom section, even over part of the stairs. So if you wanted to, you could have the building overlapping the stairs. But actually what I want to do is cut a section off, because I want, as you come down the stairs, the overhang to start at the bottom of the stairs. So I'm just going to cut a section of that off as well, and we'll go from there. So there you go, I've cut that section out now. So it's plush all the way along the top until you get to the bottom of the stairs, then the overhang will start. and I can have the top section coming up nice and high and then pillars coming down to connect to the bottom to show where it's supporting, look a bit more realistic. And we're just going to take the hot glue gun again and get a nice instant result as I glue all the way around. So now that's glued in place, the next section I'm going to be using some shreddy cardboard, so it's nice and thin. Cereal packets are great for this, and I want to create a bit of a walkway around the bottom on the actual board. So if you've seen previous builds like the Orc Shanty buildings, it's just cutting up rectangular sections of the card and just PVA gluing it in place with a slight gap. I use the E-tack from Hobbycraft again. Yeah, just leaving slight gaps in between each panel just to look like flooring. It's going to be metal in the end, this flooring, and I'm going to glue that in place all along the bottom, and then the stairs are just going to sit on top of that as well. So again, keeping the staircase separate for now has been a very useful process, because everything that goes underneath into the side of it would be a nightmare for access issues. So bit of a methodical process this, just go around cutting the squares up, gluing them in place, and we'll move on. Yep, so there's that ground floor section all done, and the stairs sits on it quite nicely there, and the corrugated card we're going to use is going to sit flush to it as well. So time to move on to the upper level. You've got that nice overhang there, and I'm going to create a section on that far left of the building, so as my second level. But again, you can do whatever you want here. You can go 2-3 levels. I'm just going to keep it pretty simple with my 2 levels. So the staircase up to the first, and then I'm going to do a couple of ladders up to this second level. So I've cut my piece that I want the height. Again, because I'm not using a staircase to the next level, I'm just using a ladder. I can really choose whatever height I want. I'm not dictated by that fixed height of the staircase. So I've cut my foam board out to the right width, and I'm just going to hot glue gun that into place, and then I'm going to just create a rectangular box essentially. So if you do come to line your stairs up, and actually the stairs are a little bit higher than that first floor, what you can do is actually put another layer of the foam, so then you're stepping up. So the last step on the staircase, you then step up to the first floor, which always looks better, I think, rather than going up the stairs and then stepping down. So all I'm going to do is just make a cutout piece of foam exactly the same size as that first floor, and then I'm just going to PVA glue it to it, and as you can see it lines up a little bit better now. So just on the off chance there is a little bit of a mistake in there, it's easily correctable. So with the height of that first floor raised a little bit now, what I want to do is create a barricade running around the outside of the building just to give a little bit more cover. I'm just working out the height of those, so depending on what models you're looking to use on here, 40k, Necromunda, you want the height to be not quite as high as this one, but not as low as the last one. So you want it just under the average waist gun height, so the guns can just push over the edge, because I think it looks terrible if you've got your models lined right up to the to a barricade and these guns aren't actually pointing over. Just that little aesthetic. So I've measured out some more foam board, and I'm just going to hot glue gun that all the way around the outside edge of this first floor, of course leaving a little bit of space for the stairs to go up to. And there we go, that first floor is now done. And what I've also done is repeated all the panelling, the floor panelling, like I did on the ground floor with the cardboard, on that first floor and the second floor. So for a building this big, what I want to do is add like a vehicle access port, a roller shutter on the back, just to break up all the walls. It's always interesting to have different things on each panel of the wall to make it look pretty cool from any angle that you view it in. So what I'm going to do here is get some of the coffee stirrers that I've shown previously in other onto my builds, and just cut it to whatever height I think a vehicle approximately is. So if I've got a Rhino or a Land Raider or something, it depends on the type of vehicle you think would drive in there. Cut the coffee stirrers to height either side, put them sort of 3-4 inches apart so it's nice and wide for the vehicle again to access through, and then cut a third shape length to join the two together, which is fairly simple to do. So with that done, if you wanted to put any more doorways on some of the other sides, that's fine, but I'm going to start to clad the outside of the building now. So I'm going to take the corrugated card and cut to the right width and length using a metal ruler and the craft knife, and I'm just going to start PVA gluing this into place. Keep it nice and pressed into the wall all the way around the building. As you can see, doesn't matter what colour you use. In the 10 pack I got from Hobbycraft, it's all different shapes and colours. Not shapes, all different colours. And it's just working your way methodically around the outside, gluing it into place. So for the height, I normally just put it in, measure it, and put a pen mark there, so it's nice and easy. I cut, and then you can finally cut with a knife if you need to get the exact right shape. And moving on. As you're progressing around, you might have slightly irregular shapes like this, where you've got the little indent for the barricade around the outside of the building. So it's just using a fine pair of scissors just to cut the cutouts of that foam board, of the corrugated card. Again, a bit of PVA glue, nice and generous, and just slot it into place. Again, you don't have to worry that it's absolutely 100% in line, because once you've sprayed it and painted it, it'll hide a multitude of sins. So again, just keep working around it. So with the outside complete, what I've also done is corrugated the inside of that railing system around the outside of the first floor. And what I want to do now is put card toppers onto the foam board where it's exposed. As you can see, I'm putting these small slices, again using the Shreddies box, cereal boxes, cutting small strips the width of that foam board. Because when you spray paint the foam board, the exposed foam inside won't look very good when it's sprayed and painted. It's got little holes, got little air gaps. So I'm just cutting out the little bits of cardboard and gluing them in place. Okay, so now looking at this little space I left, I want to create a little walkway in this raised up area. So I'm going to use sort of 5mm by 5mm wooden battens that I bought just in a DIY shop, and I'm going to cut this out to the right length, to the width of the base of the building, and then just cut basically a rectangle, that's that gap to fit, and then PVA glue those in place. So we should end up with this little rectangle that we're going to mount onto, and I'm going to suspend it about halfway up that gap, and I'm going to use the plastic cross stitch that you can get again in Hobbycraft or any sort of hobby shop. And that's great, it looks like metal grating, so I'm going to cut that out and glue into place. Before I do that, I've realised, because it is very flimsy, this material, I want a little bit more support. Otherwise, if you put a heavy model in the middle, it might buckle a little bit. So I'm just going to cut out another support strut, the same width as the walkway, and then it gives it a little bit more rigidity to that. Okay, so that's just something to bear in mind before you start gluing. So once that plastic cross stitch has been super glued into place, I'm then going to create some posts using PVC tubes, two different sizes, one will fit into the other, and these are just going to help suspend the walkway up a little bit. And the way I'm going to do this is cut small sections of the slightly bigger tube out, glue it onto the corners on top and underneath, and then the skinnier posts are going to fit into those, and it's just going to give it a little bit more, look a little bit more interesting. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut small sections, probably about 2mm wide, of the slightly bigger tube. Cut those off and glue them into those corners, because that's where the smaller post is going to fit into. And once I've glued those into each of the corner, both above and below, as you can see there, I'm just going to make sure I know what approximate height I want that platform to be on, because I need models to go underneath it and on top of it. And there can be a variety of different size models again, so depending on what system you're playing. So this is going to be about the height I want, and I'm going to roughly estimate that's how long I want my smaller tube, because that's going to again slot into it. So I'm just going to eyeball that. Very easy to work with PVC tubes. You just saw it off, put on the slightly bigger tube for the bottom section, and then that'll just sit underneath it. Now give us the height we're looking for. Again, if that was the wrong height, just cut another piece slightly longer and go from there. So now I'm going to duplicate, that's the thin pipe for its height, and I'm going to glue those into all the other 4 corners underneath. So now I've got the 3 legs for the underside done. So I'm just going to, again, you can just dry fit these into place to begin with to make sure you're happy with the overall length and height. And I'm only going to do the front 2 and a middle one, because the back of that platform is going to glue directly onto the rear of the wall, so it doesn't need a support leg there. And again, the inside just glues to the inside of the wall, so I only need 3 legs, and I'll be pretty happy that that's going to work out nicely there. So before we glue that bottom section into place, I'm just going to do the same measurement with the upper section. So I'm going to estimate the approximate length of the higher pieces and cut those to the right length. Again, I've only got 2 or 3 on the upper section to mirror the lower. And here we have the 3 upper and lower pieces ready to be glued. So those slightly fatter tube overlay pieces aren't glued into place yet, because once I've glued the actual platform in place, they're going to slide up and glue into place for this final aesthetic, because it's very hard to get the height of those uprights exactly to the right height, so the fatter piece is just going to bridge the gap slightly as I push those up, which you'll see in a second. So I've PVA glued the walkway into place now, and the lower ones, so I'm just, for the upper struts, I'm just going to put a little bit of super glue at the very top and on the top of the wider section of the tube, and then push it up into place. You get a second or 2 for it to glue, and then it's in place. So now I'm going to do the same to the other 2, just putting a dab of PVA super glue at the top of the tube, and then just push it up, and it goes nicely, fits into place, and is stable straight away, which I'm pretty happy about. Nice and stable. Last one. Again, just a touch of super glue, push it up, know pretty much where you want it to be, line it up and push that up. Again, it's a nice aesthetic. It ends up there we go, it's all in place. All those uprights are now solid, upper and lower. So here's a bit of a close-up shot, so you can see what I mean by the bigger and smaller tubes that they fit into. Just makes it look a little bit better. It's like reinforcing joints. And there's still plenty of space for the models. There's an ultramarine, so it's plenty of space for him to fit in above, not quite below because of his bolt was sat up, but necromunda figures, yeah, not a problem. So you could be happy with the building right now, you know, if you were building a lot of it for tournaments, etc. But I'm going to use one of these kits from Tabletop Combat called a Rooftop Aircon Duct set, and it's just going to add a little bit more detail onto the roof of the building. It's a great little kit because it's very sectional. You can sort of shape it to whatever you want. So it comes in all these different sections here, and you've got a couple of T-joints and the little 45-degree angle ducts as well. So I'm just going to start messing around with different sort of combinations of what you can get away with, and it's a great little kit because you can push fit the little connectors together, so you don't have to glue everything in place to begin with. So those are the 45-degree sections that you can put into place, so you can have on the top and then coming down the side of the building. Really good little kit, and it's only £6 for all that terrain you see in the picture there, the MDF, and it just adds a little bit more sophistication to the build. If you want to keep it basic, absolutely no problem, but these sorts of detailed parts just really, you know, separate the terrain apart. Again, you know, it's adding in cost to it, £6, but it keeps it nice and easy and it looks really good. So yeah, here we have, so that's one kit. That's a lot of terrain for one kit, £6. I'm very happy with that, and it really breaks up that top section which would have been flat, and then models can now move around it. It adds a lot of cover for them, but not too much. I don't want to add barricades around the edge like the lower section, because I don't want too much cover. So in the centre of it you've got the aircon and then I can put some billboards around as well to break up more cover. Yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with that. Again, you could have put that on the first floor if you wanted to, it's completely up to you. So on to the next phase of adding detail is back to the PVC pipes. that I've used previously. If you've watched any of my other builds, such as the Shantytown build, these are great for just making it look like water pipes, gas pipes, bang them around the building, and just throw as many of these on as possible. They really do work well to break things up. Again, if you want to see the technique I've used this, watch the Shantytown build where I go in a bit more detail. Basically sawing it to length, how long you need it, and then using a lighter to bend the slightly bigger bits that will then fit into to bend around the 90-degree angles. So you can see there where I've just bent that small bit of pipe so it fits nicely to the wall, moves up onto the roof and around the aircon ducts at the top. Again, this just adds a bit more detail, so then I can put another piece of piping from the roof down the side of it, just slots in, and then that'll feed down next to the other pipe, but it'll finish on the first floor rather than going all the way down to the ground floor. And just super gluing that into place as you go. So what I'm also going to show you here is just a bit of cabling that you can do as well, just to add a bit more detail. So I've got a corded cable here that I've cut off an old PC or I've had lying around the office, so I can glue this into place along the side of the building. And on the very top next to that aircon duct, you can see it's got a bit of pipeway as well, as if the cable was going to feed into a pipe. This is again so you can just paint that pipe a different colour, just to break up the colour scheme so it's not all too grey. So again, above the vehicle bay I've added another pipe, and then from there that's where the cables are going to split off. So when you've got smaller single cables like this, what I like to do is take some of the PVC tubing and then just feed it along the cable, cut it into small sections, and that just helps to glue it into place. That's the point where I'm going to glue it to the structure. So I've got the balcony section on the first floor where guys can look over the top, and just to break that line up so it's not all just a flat line, I'm going to put the cabling along that barricade there. Again, just something a bit different, it looks interesting, and then I can run the end of that cable either down the side of the stairs or just on top of the that first floor. So as you can see, I added the second bit of that cabling down to next to where there's going to be a roller shutter door. I've also found this tubing in an old bits box, this corrugated tubing, which looks awesome for, again, rooftop ventilation, or what I'm going to have here is wires going through in the inside, so smaller wires poking out. And I've got that corded wire from the other side that's brought over to this side. I've just snaked it around the building again with the tubes onto that walkway section. Tube's going to feed around. Again, just breaks things up, breaks up the monotony of the flat walls. So this corrugated tube section, I've got lots of smaller wires that I'm actually going to super glue inside. Only on this section, this exposed section. I thought it'd be cool to have a little exposed section so it's not all just boring corrugated tubing. So this section, it allows me to have a bit more colour, so I'm going to paint these cables a various amount of colours. So the corrugated ducting will come down, it's all going to be rusty looking, and then there's going to be a little bit of bright colours from these cables inside it. So again, you can do this as many times as you want to break up the scenery. I'm going to put about 5 cables inside there, and then I'm also going to put the other end, some small sections of the cable feeding out of the exposed end on the first floor. So I've hot glued that into place because the coil cable is quite tough to work with. And then this section I'm going to have just some small snags of wire, and I've just used a pair of wire cutters to expose the ends, frayed ends, as if someone's cut that open or it's not been connected to an antenna array or some sort of satellite system. Again, I'm just going to super glue those inside, or PVA glue. It gives you a bit more time to work with. This is just a dry fit to begin with, just to make sure it's going to look exactly how I want it to. Once my hands get out of the way, you'll be able to see the effect I'm going for. There you go, little clump of exposed cables. Right, it's on to painting time. So once I was happy with that level of detail I'd added on, all the pipes, all the cabling, I've just gone for a nice neutral black base spray paint over the whole model. maybe a couple of layers from a bit of distance. Don't use too much in any location because it'll, the paint effect will be bad. I've still not glued in the stairs, so I can paint behind those. They are literally almost the last thing I add. And paint scheme wise, I'm going to go for Warboss Green. Again, I've used this in a lot of my previous builds for the orcs, for the shanty towns, because it's a one coat paint. For a Games Workshop paint, it's actually fairly thick. It's a very good, it's very good dense paint, and it doesn't matter if a little bit of the black shows through, because that would happen in industrial building, and we're going to dry brush over the top of that anyway. So I'm just going to go with my brush around the outside, all the corrugated paint metalwork. I'm going to go all the way around. And you can see here as I'm painting, you can see where it's not as thick in certain places. It's a bit of a darker underneath, but that's really not a problem. It just goes on really nice. It's green, but you could go for a red or a blue, any kind of industrial colour. And it depends what you've done previously with your builds. I try and keep most of my buildings green so they all looks the same. Otherwise, it can look a bit contrasting on the table if you've got red, green and blue, yellow buildings. It gets a bit of a mishmash. So once that green layer is done, I'm fairly happy with that. If you do spot any areas that you think really could do with a second coat, fair enough, go back to them, but I really promise you, once you start the dry brushing with the metal effects and the rust, you're not going to notice that at all, and it's going to look pretty good. Next I'm going to go on to all the metal work, so I'm going to dry brush metal and rust effects on anything that's metal, so the walkways, the first floor, the tops of the railings, all the pipework connectors where the cables are connected, the edge of the corrugated doorway, which I've also put card on by now if you didn't notice. And I'm going to go for just a dark metal and the dry Reza Rust Games Workshop dry brush paint. And then I just go for a little bit of metal on my brush, dry brush, a little bit of rust, mix it on the palette, and I'm just going to go sporadically around the building, just giving it a light coating. So I'm going to start on the walkway, then I'm going to move up to the other sections like the walkway, the hanging walkway, all the bars, all the rooftop ducts, and the cabling. And here we go, all the rust effects are done now. I've also rusted up all the way around the staircase, and as we move around you can see it looks dark at the moment, obviously because we've only got the primary colours, the green and the rust, but it will start picking up once we add like the doorway, the bars that the cables feed through, paint those up, paint the cables themselves, add a bit of brightness, and then sticking some posters and billboards. It really will pick up and add any other colours you want, really. So before I do add any of those additional colours, what we're going to go through now is the actual dry brushing rust effect on the outside corrugated metal building itself. So if you've noticed like farm buildings, that sort of thing around, they've got like an old paint and then the rust really looks like it's starting to chip away because the metal is the undercoat obviously, and then the green should be on top of it, but we're doing it backwards. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, you can't tell with that effect. It's easier to do it this way around. Now I'm going to use metal in a lot of places, but also the orange, and then paint the metal over the top of the orange. Again, gives it a layered dry brushing rust effect. So yeah, just work your way all around the model. You don't want to do the entire thing because you'll lose the green colour. And I want to keep that main green colour because it's supposed to be not shanty. It's supposed to be still be imperial, but it's been neglected a bit. But there we go. I'm happy with that. It's got a good amount of the green. I try and pick the oranges up on the edges and corners where you might get moisture running down, and it breaks up nicely. I like the metal effect that comes through on the green, and the metal on the green really looks good. You could have red or blue, also works well with the rust effects. And now what I'm going to do is start picking out a few bits of colour. So I'm going to use a Mephiston red here. I'm just going to paint this little bit of ducting here that the cable's running through. I didn't need to, could have done it rusty as well, but a few extra bits of colour like this really do break the whole model up. So there we go, both of those are painted red, and I'm going to also now dry brush those rust as well, because nothing is, if everything else is rusty and one thing isn't rusty, it's going to look a little bit odd. So next is also the cabling, so the exposed cables through the conduits. I'm going to use a couple of greens and a couple of oranges and yellows. Probably do two or three cables, different colours. Some colours can be the same, you don't have to go too crazy. It's just use a fine brush and just start picking out those cables. Just take your time with it, be patient, and if you do accidentally spill onto the scenery around it, you can just go back and correct it and touch it up. So with those conduit cables painted, I'm going to now start picking out the other cables that's running around the external of the building. So the twin cable that's come down from the roof and then split off after this red junction, I'm going to do one side yellow, one side green. Again, you don't have to pick yellow and green, it could look a little bit odd. I mean, I'm not 100% sold on it, but I'm happy for now. They are bright, obviously. Don't forget the inside of that broken connector, and the other side as well, so it's matching both sides. So what I'm going to do next, because and then I've obviously painted that roller shutter red and then dry brushed that as well. So what I'm going to come to these cables is now a bit of washing. So I don't wash the entire building because it would take a lot of wash, and I don't think it's really necessary. The shadows are good enough on it with the dry brushing, but these cables need to be dulled down a bit for sure. So I'm just going to use Agrax Earth Shade, so it's a bit of a muddy wash. You could use Nuln Oil if you wanted to as a darker wash, but I quite like the Agrax muddy colour. Looks like if you've had some sort of earthy rain onto the structure. So I'm just going to go around all those cables and just ink them all up, just to really dull those down. And there we go, looking a lot darker now. Looks like it's been weathered quite nicely. Moving around the whole model, the other side's done as well. It's really dulled up that yellow and that green, which I'm very happy with. And then we can come on to the next stage. Again, for this stage, you don't have to do this. Not everyone has access to printers at work, which I use, and I've just Googled image searched Imperial propaganda posters, 40k Necromunda posters. Some I've made myself even. But a lot of the artwork has been done previously for you. I don't know who's done them, but thank you very much whoever put these onto Google. So I've basically printed these out on parcel paper, label paper. So you just peel the back off. I don't even need to glue these on. It's got self-adhesive. It'll just stick them on. And I like reds and greens and blues of the posters, which breaks up against the background of the green of the main building. And it's a nice contrast. So I've got a couple of Gene Stealer cult posters, some Zombie Beware posters that are pretty cool. And now I'm also going to put some billboards and the ladders, so don't forget about your ladders. So again, the billboards are bigger propaganda posters that I've just printed out on a bigger scale. I've got some MDF sheets that I've cut up, sprayed black, and now I'm just going to rust them up as well, because the billboards on the roof you're going to see the back of, because the front is exposed with the main advertisement on it, and the back is going to be the cover for the models that are standing on the rooftop. So you've got to make sure everything is painted. So I'm going to paint all my ladders now, 2 for the first floor up to the second floor, and 1 ladder for that walkway around the corner. So once those are done, so we've got my 2 ladders here, and I've left a gap on this first floor between some of the posters, which I've spread around everywhere now, even underneath the stairs, because the stairs are quite open. Space them a lot around. Some of them I've just doubled up, lots and lots and lots, as you would see. More zombie posters next to the walkway, all the way up the stairs. Just chuck them on, like someone's gone around there with a lot of propaganda and stuck them on. So I'm just going to PVA glue now these 2 ladders into place. I wanted 2 ladders just because the more access you can have, the better. You might have a couple of different gangs running around there, or different models. So 2 walkways up to the top, 2 ladders is fine. So this is just a simple process of PVA gluing them on and letting them dry. So now those 2 ladders are in place. Fairly happy with that. There's 1 more ladder to add on, the last small one. Again, I bought this ladder from eBay, Mdf Ladders. You can get them really cheap off eBay, and they're great. You just dab a little bit of PVA glue on them, two dots on the bottom and one on the rungs where it's going to connect to the walkway, and then just put it in place. And there you go, just let it dry. It's PVA glue, so you have got a little bit of adjustment if you need to, but good to go. So moving back to those billboards to give us a bit of cover up on the roof, I've dry brushed rust the back of them. Again, I've just printed these out on packaging labels, and I'm going to cut them out to be the approximate size of those MDF boards, and then once I cut it out, take the back off, I can just stick it straight to it, no adhesive needed, and then cut around them, and there we go. Fairly happy with that, and they're ready to be mounted onto some tubes, so I can actually raise them up off the roof. This one I've put just some MDF corrugated bits on the back, so it will sit flush, whereas these they've actually got legs. So there, I've glued them both on, and I've dry brushed rust again, those metal poles, and I'm going to glue these in place just so they're level with the top of that second floor, so they're standing up. So I'm going to use some super glue for this, so it's a bit of a quicker stick, because I want to do this section fairly fast. Just line it up about middle where I want it. Pretty happy with that. Give it a bit of firm pressure, and that'll stick in place. Again, I've used this Imperial Guard. I found that image, that's from I think Dawn of War, maybe Winter Assault, and I've added that font myself, just going into a bit of paint shop. So I've got my Necromunda model, and the second billboard, for positioning wise, I want to leave a bit of a gap, an exposed gap, so someone can shoot through there. You could have them right bunched up, the two billboards, but I think a bit of a gap just adds a little bit more narrative to your gaming play, so that model can sit through there and can be shot, which isn't too bad. And then I've got space up there for models to move around on the lower section as well, and I'm going to put some posters on the back of those billboards, and then that third one I have, which is sitting flush from the building, I'm just going to glue onto the side there. I haven't really talked about windows and doors because they don't really play much in functionality on a solid building like this, but if you want to, I've got some cardboard windows here I bought from another company that you just can add to the building if you need to, but I wouldn't have said it's really necessary. Doors, sure, you can do roller shutter doors like I've done in my shanty building, or again I bought this card set of doors here, so I might chuck a door or two around the building. And here we go, here's the finished building pretty much. I haven't put any of those windows and doors on yet, but I can do. I can always go back to it later if I want to, add some, give it a little bit more character. Again, you could add more cabling if you want, more pipe work, more window ducts, more billboards, more posters, whatever you feel. So I could put a door just here, so when you go up the steps, up the ladder to that first floor walkway, there's actually a purpose to it. But as you can see, it's a nice, it actually turns out it's a big structure. You know, you might think you've only got an A4, slightly bigger than an A4 base, but actually when you take height into consideration as well, it actually really makes it stand up quite big, and it's a nice line of sight blocker. So if you were making these for a tournament, if you needed like a dozen of these, I wouldn't worry too much about all the cabling and the pipe work, but the structure and the corrugated card and some ladders and stairs really do, you know, that creates a nice big line of sight blocking, and it's cheap and it's easy, as I've shown, hopefully. Just there below that billboard you can see one of those windows I've now added. And on the walkway underneath you can just see I've added a door there, so for purposes of access you've got that little ladder along the walkway into the door, and you can pop out somewhere else. See some different angles of the building with the red roller shutter. I'm fairly happy with that, it makes it stand out. Quite a lot of posters, I do like a poster. And plenty of access on the roof so you can move models around, there's a bit of cover. I'm pretty happy with that. Again, once you've got the skills under your belt, you can build these different kind of structures. So this is a A3 sized base I've started with. You can see I've added ladders, walkways, pipe work, the windows, posters, sitting it next to this one, you know, they fit in really well together, and then having them both green really makes them look uniformed as well. Here's a previous build I've done as well, going a bit more height, so a smaller base, but I've actually gone for, what's that, probably 3-4 stories. Different balconies, again ladders, access, all really works together, billboards, posters. Once you've got this skill set, you really can do anything you want with it. So thanks for watching, guys. Cheers if you got all the way through it, and if it's helped you build your own pieces of terrain like that. If you like the video, feel free to give us a like. Leave us a comment if there's anything you thought I could have done differently, or things that you would add yourself. You know, is there too much detail, not enough? You know, it's completely up to you. We've got a Facebook page as well, Easy Terrain Builds. Come find us on there, and I've posted up work in progress videos and posters and images as I go. Thanks for watching, guys. Feel free to subscribe and watch out for future videos. Catch you in the next one.